YouTube, Final Community, ESQ fans, random people on the internet. My name is Giggens. I'm joined here today by our friend David Beard of Endless Summer Quarterly. Hey man, how's it going?
Good, good. Thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely. We're gonna follow up on last issue of ESQ with this current issue, which is volume two, talking about the 1985 album. And this issue for me, digging into it was, I almost want to say it was more fun because we're just going into more detail and more minor details about just random things I would have never thought about. Um, when putting these two together, I know we've talked about this a little bit before. You've said this is like the first time you've done a volume one and a volume two. What does this mean for you in terms of ESQ's not necessarily the history of ESQ, but you've never done something like this before. So what's it mean for you to do a project like this on an album that doesn't get its due?
Oh, I, I know that we've mentioned this before. I think maybe it was with when you and I were talking with Steve Lewis at the Beach Boys Basement channel. Um, I have never thought about it not getting its due because I've always enjoyed it and always have listened to it, and I listened to it umpteenth times when it was originally released that summer
Yeah.
of '85. Anytime I was in the car, that was pretty much, I really don't, I was either listening to the radio because back then a lot of stuff in the 80s was coming out. I mean, Duran Duran was really a popular act. Bryan Adams was a really popular
Yeah.
act. Genesis had a lot going on back then.
Huge. Yeah.
And the Monkees were just beginning to enjoy a resurgence. So
That was
this to me had always been a great album, and I didn't really ever listen to it in a way where I was thinking from the drum machine or anything. I never really thought about that. I recognized immediately that it was an album without Dennis,
Yeah.
um, and that it was the first one without him. And I really liked, I talked about this before, I really liked the song Male Ego because it made me think of Dennis.
Yeah.
Um, and I liked the whole vocal presentation of the album. I always have. It's something that reminded me of early Beach Boys. Not anything specifically. It didn't remind me of '65 Beach Boys or '62 or anything like that. It just sounded like the Beach Boys again.
The feel.
And out of like the Beach Boys "Love You" sounded different. MIU sounded different. Keeping the Summer Alive sounded a little bit more rocky, but
Mhm.
it's obviously still the Beach Boys. But this was the album, the '85 album was the first time I felt as though I was listening to something that reminded me specifically of that group that I fell in love with a handful of years earlier
Right.
through the Endless Summer album and the Best of the Beach Boys and Pet Sounds and All Summer Long. It was a summer album, and that's really, and I liked it. I thought I was at an age in '85, I was 20. So for me, the more adult content really worked for me. It's getting late and romantic stuff. And she believes in loving. I liked it. It
Right.
just fit me
Right.
for my age. So to do this if you can hold up volume two, I don't have it handy. So this is volume one, and then this is volume two. And I don't know if you noticed, but I put the American Band artwork in the little side banner over here on the there, but also in the yellow.
Oh yeah. Look at that.
So it's over there too. And I have to let me read. So doing this, getting in touch with Malcolm Leo was a godsend.
Yeah.
Malcolm, he's just super friendly. He would just suddenly call me like days in a row just to make sure he was doing what I needed him to do in terms of what photos I needed, lining up the right time for the two of us to talk. Very, very integrated in the whole process. And I don't get that often. I did get that with Ron Outback, who I'm continuing to work on that stuff. But
Nice.
Malcolm was very integrated in the whole process. He wanted to make sure I had what I needed. And as you saw when you read the interview, there's lots of behind the scenes photos. And I could not believe the riches of what he sent me. All the stuff with Carl up in Colorado. I
Yep.
mean, Mike, where he was. It was, and then to be given the location, where he gave me the location of everybody, and the little details, like when he was at the what's the yeah, so that's Mike. So he's like Al where he was, Mike where he was, and then how it all got started, just all that little minutia. It was just so cool. And then how Bruce had cream cheese and bagels for everybody at the Balboa. Is that what it was called? The Balboa Club,
Uh,
Bay Club, the Balboa Bay Club, right?
right.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, to be able then now to be able to go back and watch the documentary is just
There's
it's just
context
even
there.
more fascinating to me. And one of the things I didn't ask him about, and it occurred to me when I was transcribing the interview, was because I said, Malcolm, thanks to you, I became a Smile fan.
Right.
Because he had so cleverly taken the Good Vibrations promotional film and put it with the Fire music. And I had never seen the Good Vibrations promotional film, so I didn't know any better.
Right.
And I
Same.
just went, oh my God, this is cool. And then they showed Brian with the fire hat in the studio going,
Yeah.
and that kind of told you.
Yeah. It worked. It
Because
worked
of Brian,
so well.
and then he pointed out how Brian was actually smoking in bed.
Yeah.
And I
Right.
never noticed that little detail. I never put that with the fire, and I just thought,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. But another thing he did, and I mentioned this last night on Beach Boys Talk, was when he has Bruce walking up the stairs, he says, I joined the beach, my pants were too small. And then Brian took a giant leap forward. The
Yeah.
album, Pet Sounds. And any time that you can go to any documentary or book or what have you, there's kind of a 3 to 5 song selection that goes with Pet Sounds and anything that it's attached to. It's usually Wouldn't It Be Nice, God Only Knows, Sloop John B, Caroline No, and maybe I Just Wasn't Made for These Times in
Yeah.
the rare circumstances. Malcolm didn't use any of those. Bruce says the album, Pet Sounds, and it's here today. It's bum, 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 and
The
it,
weird middle part. Yeah.
yeah, and bum, 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 bum,
Yeah.
bum,
People
and
talking in the background.
I'm so that introduction for me to Pet Sounds was so different than anything that has come to pass since, or even
Right.
before. That he and his team thought about that and cleverly put those things together, because those things, as you could tell from the interview, weren't mistakes.
Right.
They really planned everything they did, and I just thought it was fascinating that of all the songs you could choose from Pet Sounds, they went with Here Today, used that instrumental section to kind of make it, because I suppose they could have used what is it? Oh, what was the beginning of Here Today? The bum, 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 ba-dum, bum, bum.
Oh, waiting for the day.
Waiting for they could have used that just as easily, because that's got that kind of percussive heaviness.
Yeah.
So, but no, I was fascinated. So long answer. I think this has primed me for what's ahead with ESQ, because this is the first time I've done a 2-arc volume set with a topic or an era. And I think ideally, if I had everything to begin with, I may have done Malcolm's first and then done Steve's,
Oh, sure.
because
Yeah.
timeline wise.
Right.
But they
Right.
go together great. And but now I'm working on this Ron Outback stuff, and I've spoken to so many people and got stuff from I've got stuff from Charles Lloyd, Ron, Mike Love, Al Jardine, Jeff Peters, Jerry Outback, Paul Ferrazzo, Peter Marshall, Mike Kowalski, Rod Novak, and Ed Talea, who were both from King Harvest. AJ Cervantes, Robert Corey. I mean, the name. Tomorrow I'll wake up and there'll be somebody else. In fact, I know that I think there's 2 more people that I'm going to be speaking to. So I think the Ron Outback or the MIU celebration stuff is probably going to end up being at least 2, at least.
That's so cool. It's needed because there's nothing out there about that era and those albums and the details behind them. Like, we know they exist, they're hard to find, but like getting details about how and why and where, for hardcore fans, it's going to be invaluable to be able to read something about that for the people who were actually part of it.
I love. I just really. It's such a. I've been doing it for so long. I don't really think of it as anything I don't think of it as anything beyond just what I do. I don't think
Yeah.
it is special or anything like that. It's what I'm doing. So when I get like when Malcolm just saw the cover, he went nuts because he wanted that shot on the cover.
Really?
Yes, he wanted that shot, and that's the best screen grab he could give me. But that was something he wanted because he kept talking about that in our interview. That shot, that slow motion shot of them walking and facing, waving to the audience with their backs, and
Yeah.
he kept talking about that. And so he sent me a screen grab of it, and I thought, well, okay, let me just see how it looks. And so I tried to use different art techniques to it. So because it was so grainy,
Right, right.
I tried to give it kind of like it was a watercolor or something kind of vibe.
Yeah.
It's still because you can very distinctly tell who's who.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what I liked about it. It said it didn't matter if I kind of gave it that weird look because you can still, who Carl, Mike, Al, Bruce, and Brian are.
Yeah,
There's,
especially by the
there's
shorts.
yeah, there's no doubt who anybody is. So that's what I liked about it. I think if I had been if the outfits weren't so obvious,
Yeah.
it may have been a little bit harder for me to kind of picture it. But it was just so obvious. It didn't, you know exactly who they are. So
It's an
that's
amazing picture. I mean, it says so much. It would have been a great cover. It really would have been. So it's cool that you recreated it for the issue. It's got a special place for that now. Um, with talking to Malcolm Leo, like the way he tells the Beach Boys story in that, and he mentions this in the interview, is like we all know the story starts off with like the girls, the cars, the surf. They all have the same intro, and then they usually kind of fall apart in the '60s, and then there's nothing else after that. But he did a great job of keeping up with current Beach Boys through the '70s. Um, did he mention at all what's important to him about telling that story beyond the hits? Like why that means so much to him? Because it feels like there's a lot of Beach Boys stuff out there. You see the same thing over and over
yeah,
again, but
yeah,
this one's always been special.
yeah. I think he touches on it early in the interview where I ask him about his background and
Right.
how he grew up in California. So it was a very much a part of who he was, and so I think that gave him a direct connection and understanding to them, regardless of what year he was doing it. I really think he had a, and you almost have to, right? I mean, the things he did and the way that he did them in that documentary are so specific and
Yeah.
so well done that you really do have to have a connection to even come up with those ideas. Because
Yeah.
if you don't have the connection, if you don't have that love for that music, how would you even think to, okay, here's the Smile stuff we're listening to, and this was really the first time the Smile stuff
Right.
legit was shown to the world.
Right. Right. Right.
Um, how do you do that? And how do you make a dinner out of something that's just a bunch of potatoes? There's no meat, so how do you
Yeah.
put it together in a way that it looks presentable? And I just thought, I remember at some point when I really got into Smile years after I'd watched the documentary. I remember at some point thinking to myself, what? They use that, and that's the Good Vibrations film?
I know.
Why would they do? But now I'm so appreciative because had it not been for that documentary, I, and Smile continues to be, I think, in my opinion, estimation, some of the greatest stuff, even in pieces, ever attempted with the technology of its day.
Oh, for
And
sure.
the fact that he got as far as he did is amazing.
It's incredible. And one of my favorite bits about the interview is him running into Al Jardine when he was a young kid buying 2020 at the record store, and Al remembering him years later.
Yeah.
I mean, even coming on board as a Beach Boys fan at that album proves that he's a bit different with his Beach Boys fandom, and like that caught his ear was that kind of bizarre record. It wasn't An Endless Summer, it wasn't Pet Sounds, it wasn't
Right.
Surfing Safari or something. So that in and of itself is pretty cool. His memories about talking and working with the guys were great too, like especially with how much he enjoyed working with Bruce and Al's enthusiasm to run down the field, and film that clip. It sounds like he had a lot of fun with the guys, and it's just so cool to think of them as in their mid 40s, you know,
Mhm.
talking so longingly about the past, which had only been about 15 years at that point, which is weird to think about. um, and same with me. Like I grew up watching that video as well. I always thought Fire was that video of them going on the fire poles
Mhm.
and no idea it was for Good Vibrations till many years later. And in my brain, it's always gonna be Fire. Like that's just
Yeah.
how the video works, and it's perfect. You know, like, you hear the bells, they go down the tube, done. Um, what was one of your favorite moments about talking with him and learning about his process? What was kind of your takeaway from him?
Just how much he cared.
Mm,
That was the thing that and it wasn't just how much he cared about the Beach Boys and doing something right for them, which is what we talk about, but
yeah,
how much he cared in the process. How much he was concerned with, did I have enough? How much he was concerned with, do you feel like we have everything we need?
yeah,
Is this? So he was almost still. It was like he was almost treating the interview as a bonus content for the documentary in a way. Like
so
he
cool.
he was treating it that way. And when it would take me too long to find it on my phone or my text messages, but I remember when I sent him the cover, it was like he said something very profane and profound, and he said goosebumps, and he sent it to a fellow acquaintance of ours, and because the buddy put us in touch with one another, so he sent the cover to him right away, and I didn't even realize it until I talked to that guy the other a few days afterwards. He said,
Yeah,
"Oh, yeah, Malcolm sent me the cover," and so that told me that Malcolm felt rewarded in the exchange, that what we had done
sure.
together, even before he saw what was inside the magazine, just from the
Yeah,
cover, he was thrilled. And he's called me 3 times since getting the magazine just to kind of go over what he loves.
that's so cool.
So, but again, that's just a great example of having the pleasure and privilege and honor to work with somebody who understands what you're trying to do
Hmm.
and gets it and then is integrated into it and really invests in it and wants to see themselves. They trust what you're doing, but then they want to see themselves represented a certain way, but they still have no idea, right?
Yeah,
They still don't know how the puzzle is going to be put together until they actually
right,
are holding a magazine in their hands. So
right.
that's always rewarding when with anybody, with anybody. I mean, if somebody trusts you, I mean, I see that coloring book up there behind you, and I'm reminded of your work. So whenever you're tasked with something, or even if you don't consider it a task per se, just something creative, right? You're doing something creative. That's how I look at most of what I do. That's, I'm sure, how you look at most of what you do. It's a
Sure.
creative process. So when someone trusts you with that process, and then they're thrilled after the fact, it's just like
It's the best feeling.
it is,
I
because
mean, it's just incredible. Like to
and
have
then
that.
yeah, and
Okay.
then you just hope that the readers feel the same way.
As a reader, as an outsider to that conversation, it is infectious. It's a contagious interview because you feel his enthusiasm and his memory is so sharp about working with these guys, and the pictures are just unreal. All these behind the scenes shots are just so cool. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
the
He said,
detailing.
I know. He was sending and I love that. Show that one again. So that photo up here on the in your left hand of Brian and Mike, with Brian with his arm around Mike. I just fell in love with that photo the second I saw it, because there's so much in the interview. Well, in the whole issue, Landy is discussed
Right.
throughout the whole magazine, and
Right. Yeah.
no one really has anything particularly flattering to say about him.
Right. Yeah.
But to see that Landy was involved, and in spite of that, Brian and his cousin are there, and they're bonding, and just look at that moment right there. I mean, that moment to me was a big deal to get that photo,
Oh, for
because
sure.
you know you just we never got to see that behind the scenes. We just see them when they take the stage and do their songs and stuff. we always, it just seems to me that for so long, most Beach Boy fans have got this kind of consensus idea in their brain that Brian and Mike just, they're oil and water or some odd thing. And it's just so far from the truth.
I
And
know.
so when I saw that photo, I just was like, oh my gosh, this is just gotta go in there. I almost wanted to make it the whole gatefold, but I just thought, no. I want to get the vibe of the whole concert captured in that little section. So I had to play around with those photos for a little while, but it doesn't matter where they live. It doesn't
Right.
matter who's in their lives. That connection that the two of them have is
Hmm.
is unchanged. It may be unchanged by circumstance. It may be changed by circumstances and other things, outside
Yeah.
forces, whatever you want to attribute it to. But how they feel about one another in their minds and in their hearts is cement. It's
It's
solid.
unshakable, and it's. I think it's happily something that the world won't know about because it's meant to be for them. Like that's
That's yeah.
we know a lot about them. They can keep some things to themselves, like the happiness that they know they have, and
That's right.
let the
And
people make up the BS.
yeah, and there's I mean anyone can go to YouTube right now and find where Brian says something disenchanting about Mike.
Oh, sure, and vice versa. Yeah,
Well, right. But if people really want to know what the relationship was about, and they were around in 2012 for the reunion tour, look for their appearances, whether it was the Tonight Show or whatever have you,
yeah,
where Mike, because it was mostly I had Mike and Brian who would make the appearances.
yeah. They were on
They would play as a group, but it was usually Mike and Brian who would come out and sit down.
right.
And Mike in almost every one of them said, "Well, no, Brian's vocal arrangements. He's a genius.
Yeah,
And Mike has never, in my 30 years of talking to the guy, he has never downplayed Brian's vocal arrangement. He
huh,
has never belittled what Brian was capable of. Mike has never made a claim that he's where Brian is. Nobody does that
right,
because they all know better.
right.
So I, you know, it's,
I
yeah,
mean,
I never have quite understood the need to pull somebody else down to make somebody else solid. Because Brian doesn't need that. Brian doesn't need anybody to pull Mike down.
right,
And and,
exactly.
and would actually prefer they not.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, speaking of vocal performances, the interview with Jeffrey Foskett is one of my favorite things I've read in this magazine. I've been a subscriber for 5 or 6 years at this point. This is one of my favorite things I've ever read because he's just a walking textbook of information, and it's like he remembers everything, and it's you can tell just how sharp and fluid his memory is. But reading about him joining the guys and getting Sean Connery, I mean, that whole thing was crazy. But like, uh, his work on the '85 album was fascinating to read about. Just how much time he was there. He'd get there early, he'd stay there late. Carl was a big fan of his. All the guys loved him. But those moments where he talks about being around the microphone vocally with just the guys, or doing so many background parts that would either get used or filled in, his work on that album is humongous. Um, what was kind of your takeaway talking with him in terms of what was the feeling that Jeffrey gave off about that album? What was the vibe that he gave off from that album? Because he speaks highly of it, but what was your interpretation of it?
I think we touch on it in the interview because what I considered a tough question for him was because Carl was in charge and Carl was the one who made the diplomatic, we'll call it, decision to remove most of Jeff's vocals
Mhm.
because Jeff was not an, in quote, Beach Boy.
Right, right.
And, and I guess we'll tell people who's watching, in that question and answer, Jeff says, well, because it was Carl, I was 100% comfortable with it. If it had been anybody else, it would have been upsetting.
Absolutely.
So that
Absolutely.
again, that's kind of what I got from him. The whole time, him talking about that, he really just just like the rest of us. I mean, he really loved the Beach Boys music, and when he got into that group, he really enjoyed all those opportunities that he was presented with, which were so many.
I
Uh,
know. It's insane.
it's one of the things that that he obviously still carries, because he briefly mentions it in the interview, is the criticism that he must have got wind of from the That's Why God Made the Radio album in 2012,
Right.
where people were complaining too much Fosquet, too much Fosquet. And the only thing I'll say to that is, and I've always felt this, and I've always, it's always been my feeling, I really wish that they had worked something out, them being the Beach Boys, that in 2012 reunion that Matt Jardine, as well as Jeffrey, had been a part of that group dynamic, because I think Matt, as well as Jeff, on those backing vocals would have made the difference. And if anybody watching is not sure about that, just listen to Brian's No Peer Pressure,
Yeah.
because Scott and Matt are on that album.
Right.
And Matt just
Right.
makes everything kind of he sounds more in that Beach Boys.
He's got that twang, that Beach
Yeah,
Boys.
yeah, the DNA. He's got the DNA in him, so it's
Yeah.
just a little bit more natural. But Jeff very plainly says in the interview, I'm not Carl Wilson. I'm not Brian Wilson. I don't sound like Brian Wilson. I've never
Right.
sounded like Brian Wilson. So the idea that I was ever trying to be or replace anybody just isn't so. He was asked to sing, and so he would do it. And during the '85 album, he was kind of an ancillary vocalist. He would lay down the scratch vocals so that when the guys came in, they would have something to listen to and follow.
Right.
So, but he's all over that. He's all over everything from when he joins onward. He's kind of in everything. And he talks about it, including Living Doll.
That was awesome. I didn't know he's a part of that at all. That was completely new to me. Um, love that. The parts that he sang that got cut, do we know if they're still hanging around somewhere, or were they deleted? Because I know a lot of it was done digitally at that time.
I would think they're probably gone. Now if there's a chance, if they're still around, I would only think that they would be because maybe Steve Levine kept them, but I don't think Steve's got the masters based on my interview with him from the issue before.
Interesting.
I don't know. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I really don't know the answer to that.
I mean, just having known that album inside and out for so long, it would be fascinating to hear a Jeffrey Foskett version with his voice so
It would be
prominently.
great to have the '85 album repackaged
Right.
with sessions.
Yeah, a version with
Just like
him.
they've done everything else, like the
Yeah.
Feel Flow stuff and all that, with sessions, and have those sessions and hear the workings and hear how the songs developed and everything. I
So
mean,
cool.
just
One thing I found very interesting is that, like, he writes his own stuff too, but like he never once was like, "Hey guys, I got a song." Can you imagine doing that in the beach? Like, no, I agree with him completely. And like, I would never have done something like that. So to read about him saying that, like, I wasn't gonna give the guys my songs. Like, come on.
wasn't going to be that guy. That's right.
Right,
I wasn't going to
right.
be that guy.
Exactly. But like, just knowing that he trusted Carl so much with, like, all right, they're gonna cut my stuff, but only because Carl's doing it. I trust this process. Like, he knows, he's been the band director at this point for 16 years, 17 years. He knows what he's doing. Um, his work ethic is incredible. Being a part of all those sessions, doing all that work, and having so much of it cut, and still hanging with the guys and not being disappointed by it, that speaks volumes to the kind of guy that he is. Like, he knows what the end game is for these guys,
Yeah, big picture.
Right. That's a better way.
Big picture thinking. Yeah. I can bitch and moan about this and say, "Hey, why'd you do that?" And then I can go find a new band.
Right. Or stay with the Beach Boys.
or stay with the Beach Boys. Right. Exactly. So,
that's funny. Him talking about Dr. Landy was interesting because, like, like you nailed it. This whole magazine, there's just nothing great about that guy. Well, just nothing great about that guy anyway. But it just sounds like everybody who came in contact with him in the studio or at the film set was just like, why is this guy here? It's like,
right.
he's
So
doing everything.
yeah. So with the documentary, Malcolm had this great scene, which the readers can read about, all planned, and everybody agreed to it. Brian thought it was a great idea, because most of the documentary guys are kind of on location, and they had a spot for Brian that they were going to do a really cool, picturesque thing. And Landy walked up and said, "Let me direct it." And Malcolm looked at him and said, "No." and Malcolm is thinking to himself, "You're not a director. What are
Yeah.
you?" So
No.
Landy kiboshed the whole thing because he didn't get his way. He didn't get to direct. So that went out the window. And then later in the issue, after Fosquette's interview, we run into the same thing
Yeah. Yeah.
with producer Spencer Proffer, where Landy again walks up to Spencer Proffer and says, "I want to produce this." And he says, "No, you're not a producer."
That's a good transition because that interview was interesting too. It's funny you actually in the article you put a picture of Peter Noon's one of the Glory Boys records
On the Johnston label.
on the Johnson label, and like I've got that album and I've got a
Oh,
promo copy.
okay.
His solo album, that one and the one before it, with his group at that time, is also on the Johnston label. And I remember discovering that fairly recently, last few years, being like, wait, when did Bruce Johnson have a record label? Like that's no one talks about that. Do you know how long that existed for?
It was for just a few years. I don't have all that information yet, but
Yeah,
I think it was just for a few years, like late 70s
yeah,
and like 80, 84, 85. It wasn't very long. It wasn't very long, because you got to think, okay, Bruce is away from the Beach Boys. When would he have had time to do it? When would he have done it? It would have been when he was away from the Beach Boys.
yeah,
So then he comes back and he doesn't have as much time to kind of give to it. But again, this is so amazing that Bruce is the guy who brought Steve Levine in, and Bruce is the guy who brought Spencer Proffer in. It's so it's this, and
Blue.
Bruce produced "Keeping the Summer Alive." So
Yeah,
it's so interesting and strange, and I think in a good way how Bruce is so integrated into the music business
yeah,
and knows everybody. And we the more that I find out about these periods of the Beach Boys, it's because of Bruce.
yeah,
It's like these third and fourth. Even Mike's first solo album, "Looking Back with Love," was done with Kurt Betcher, who
yeah.
was a friend of Bruce. So that's kind of through Bruce. So it's very, so whether you like the stuff or not, it's not the discussion. But I think the connection, Bruce's connectivity to the music business, and the number of people that he knew and how he was integrated is just fascinating. It's fascinating. It's its own story. And I kind of, every time I'm talking about, I won't be surprised if I'm talking about Ron Outback and somebody tells me something about, in fact, today, there was a side thing that had to do with Bruce and the group Sailor when I was talking to the guy today. So I'm going to pursue that further with him to understand. But so again, and Sailor was Steve Levine and Bruce
That's so cool.
with George Martin
That's so cool.
and Kurt Betcher. So again, it's just amazing to me. And Bruce would just, if you ask him about it, he'd go, he would just
Yeah.
downplay it. I asked him about an album he did. I can see the cover. I can't think of what it's called, but it's from the early 60s. He did it with Steve Douglas. It was just him, and it's like a car album. Oh, the Hot Rods. No, it wasn't a Beach Boys. It was around the same period of the early 60s. And a lot of the things he did, including in Amsterdam, I recently heard of a commercial that he did when the Beach Boys were on tour in the early 70s. He had gone through Amsterdam, and I guess they caught him at a radio station one day for an interview, and he did some weird thing called Veronica.
That's a song?
Veronica. Yeah, and so this guy in Amsterdam, I guess maybe the Beach Boys had gone over there in recent years or something, but he Bruce, look, I got this. Bruce says it's rubbish. And because to Bruce it is, it's really nothing. It's nothing. Why are you even talking to me about that? To him.
So funny.
And the same would be true if you talk to him about Chasing the Sky. He probably wouldn't be so interested in talking about that as he might be talking about Spencer Proffer, or he might want to talk about Randy Bishop, right? Because Bruce is a guy that is so he's a really interesting person, because if you're ever around him, when he's around someone that he considers interesting,
Yeah.
it's so much fun to watch because he's a light bulb. I mean,
Yeah.
he's just into it, right? It can be, it doesn't matter the age, it doesn't matter whether the person's well known or not, but if Bruce knows your background and he knows what you do and he's into what you do and he appreciates and respects what you do, it's just, now I've had that directed at me specifically, but I like watching it.
Right.
I like seeing him
That spark go off.
just, yeah, that spark go off and go, hey, and go over and talk to that person and go, hey, so how are your studies at such and such and such and such going? And
Yeah.
because he's all about the bigger picture with everything he does. Everything
Yeah.
Bruce has ever done, he's always about. I mean, we just think, okay, he left the Beach Boys, he was gone for a number of years, wrote I Write the Songs, he came back. So much more went
I
on.
he's always been a busy guy. I mean, I would love to do I would love to chat with him, or if you could chat with him at some point about the creation of that Johnson record label, because like I wonder if it was done for a reason or if he had like a side project he was thinking of, because that
You
always
know,
happens with record
I
labels.
don't know what he'll say. I'll be seeing him in November, but I'll try to bring it up. But I would imagine what he would say to me is something along the line of, "You're getting really desperate, aren't you?" I it will be very close to that.
Because I mean, I've reviewed that Tremblers record, the Peter Noon, his band in 1980, the Tremblers,
Yeah.
because they played for the Beach Boys for a handful of shows in the summertime, so they opened for the Beach Boys. I just remember looking at the label one day, being like, Johnson Records, that can't be, and doing like a what little research exists. I was like, oh my god, it's really him. So I mean, for me, I find that fascinating because I love the Herman's Hermits, I love Peter Noon stuff. Mixed that with the Beach Boys, and Bruce was on some of this stuff. He sang some of it, he produced it, like a lot of work went involved in these records that he might just kind of toss off, but I think a lot of fans would dig it. Um, long story short, back to Spencer there. What was it like talking to him? Because he's been all over the place. He's done all kinds of music. So what was it like to learn from him about working with the Beach Boys, but also doing some heavy stuff, heavy
I
metal stuff?
I
What was
know.
that?
Well, yeah. I mean, he really. For those who don't know who Spencer Proffer is, Google him, and really the first thing that's going to come and pop up that most people can directly associate with his name would be Quiet Riot's "Come On Feel the Noise," which is where he was the first producer to take a heavy metal band to the top of the charts.
Yeah, that song was
And
massive. Yeah.
yeah, so he was hot. He was a hot producer, and it's not unlike. So, and a Bruce, this was Bruce again. This is a Bruce connection. And Bruce did the same thing with Steve Levine. Steve Levine was hot. So they went from Chasing the Sky to Steve Levine. And that's the same year. They did that the same year. So in 84. So, well, 83, 84, going in, they finished it up in 84. So it's, Spencer was a wonderful energy. I mean, I don't know what his age is right now, but you would not know he's his age. He is very quick-witted, very sharp, very. I mean, I felt like I was talking to somebody who's maybe 30. I mean, he just was
Wow.
really engaged, really just kind of rattling off one thing after the other.
Yeah.
It was like I had to hold my thought. Okay, I want to ask him something, and I had to wait for him to get kind of. He talked as much as me, so if you can imagine, and but everything is history. And I went and looked up his history, and there's a brand new the Elvis comeback specials back out again. Spencer's in charge of that.
No way.
Yeah,
That's cool.
you should see the stuff that he is connected to is just absolutely
That's
amazing.
levels of deep.
And the most touching thing he said to me right before we hung up is he says, David, I really like you. Figure out how you can use me. So we'll see. I haven't figured it out yet, but I really loved that Jeffrey Foskett talked about the Chase in the Sky session
Yes. Yeah.
and that I was able to, it was because of Jeff's interview and I transcribed it. I thought, man, ideally I wanted Bob Gaudio. I was in touch with his people. He wasn't available.
Man, that would have been
Well, I'm
great.
not going to give up on that. If whenever he becomes available, I want
Yep.
to get that interview.
Yep.
And because the box set, the Four Seasons box set just came out, and I guess from what I understand, there's something.
5 CDs.
Yeah, it's like $500 or something, though,
Yeah, it's
right?
huge. It's 45
Like,
CDs. It's massive. Yeah, it's everything they've ever done. Yeah.
so, and there's something. Brian's on the hype sticker, so I don't know what Brian's involvement is, but he's on the hype sticker.
Huh.
Um,
Cool.
uh, so it maybe just East meets West. I don't know, but I
Could
really
be.
I'm not sure. But um, it could just be he could be just a forward that he writes or something. But I had no idea. But so I wanted Gaudio and Valley. I reached out to both of their people, but Frankie just got married again,
Saw
and
that. Yeah.
and then he's back on tour now or about to go back on tour. So I haven't
Yeah.
heard from his people, but I'm trying to get both of those guys because I want to talk about East meets West. And so I'm not going to give up on that. Um, but I really wanted East meets West and Chase in the Sky talked about in the same issue. I had really wanted that because that was the other piece of the 84 puzzle.
Yeah.
Um, other than Carl doing You Were Great, How Was I with Olivia Newton-John, but neither
Yeah.
Olivia or Carl are here anymore, so that would be hard to do.
No. We'll see.
So I really wanted to do that, but when I got, I just put on my Sherlock Holmes hat and just went like looking for Randy Bishop, and I could not find him. And then I accidentally kind of came across Rand Bishop and did some sleuthing on Rand Bishop, and I thought, this is the guy. And I contacted him, and he said, "How'd you figure out it was me?" And I said, "Well," and I told him how I got through, went through the different sleuthing, and he said, "Oh, that's pretty impressive, David. That's pretty impressive." So we do the interview, and I transcribe it, and I was just fascinated by all the stuff he talked about, the detail, Landy and his boyfriends, um, and then talking about how Mike's not on the record, which surprised me.
That was interesting. Yeah.
And so then I kind of got back to Rand and I said, if you got contact for Spencer, I really think it would behoove this story to have him included because you're the songwriter and Spencer's the producer.
Right.
And Spencer did the whole, and much like Rand did wrote most of the songs for the Up to the Creek soundtrack, Spencer produced the whole thing.
Right.
Spencer's energy was just kind of through the roof. I just was so happy to talk to him. It's interesting too how some people have less of a filter and some people have more of a filter.
Right.
Rand had less of a filter. He was kind of a little bit more open about what he experienced. We had to fine tune some things because the language actually was a little harsher than what finally appeared.
Really.
Yeah, I had to massage some things. I let him have final tweak, but I just this passage right here, and he understood why I was having difficulty. I didn't have to explain it to him. He knows I have relationships with the guys, and I was like, listen, I have to.
Yeah. Keep it kind of cool here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
So
Fonzie.
he was amenable to that and understood it.
Yeah.
But I thought he really went into detail, and so when I had Spencer doing the Zoom with Spencer, I kind of said to him, well, listen, you don't know what Rand has said. Let me tell you a little bit about what Rand has said. So
Yeah.
that kind of allowed Spencer to open up a little bit more. So I thought that those two, again, Malcolm, Jeffrey, and then Spencer and Rand just made for a, when you put it with this, when you put that issue with this issue, it's kind of a really cohesive 1-2 punch, and it kind of just tells one. And I would say to people, read the fall issue first, because then when you get into this, you'll understand what Jeffrey's talking about with
Right.
the 85 album.
It's just a wild era thinking about the producers of the Beach Boys in the 80s. You have a guy to Come On Feel the Noise. You had Culture Club references. Like, they were really getting out of their comfort zone to see what can happen. And they hadn't done that for a very long time. So it's really cool that this era exists. And they made some really interesting connections. They worked with Ringo. They worked with Frankie Valli. I mean, things were a little different at this point that it just gets overshadowed. I mean, because I wasn't there, but like, growing up, this album just did not get talked about. And so doing these deep dives, having both of these issues with the record, it's nice to have that companion to give it context. That's why I love these things. They're just like you're walking in the shoes of the people who were there.
Yeah. Thank you. This is one, and then he's got volume two right there. There's the two down in the corner.
Speaking of ESQ, you've got some VIP packages coming up for subscribers. So tell me more about that and what that's all about.
Okay. So I'm gonna grab something real quick.
Okay.
And
Because this is kind of cool one. I think people are
shared
going
that
to really dig
I
this.
shared this last night. So this is just as an example. So the idea of the VIP thing, membership with ESQ, has been something that we've been thinking. We, being Lee Dempsey and I, have been thinking about a number of years. And it just we had this idea of different levels like gold, silver, whatever. The VIP thing, it was a way for, I thought, how, because I've been doing Zooms more often. And I thought, well, what? And the hardest thing for me in doing the VIP idea was thinking to myself, is anyone really going to want to do a Zoom with me? Really, and that was an honest question.
Yeah.
I kept thinking, is anybody really going to want to pay extra money to do a Zoom with me? Because is that, well, and that's not the only thing they get. So the VIP membership is, you get the year subscription, and if somebody's a current subscriber, they can get it too. So if you've got 2 issues left, that's fine. And if you suddenly subscribe for the VIP membership, it's good for a 1-year subscription. Your 2 issues that are already still left will just carry over. They'll be after the 1 year, and then you'll still have those.
Right.
So regardless of how many you got, or if it's a brand new subscription, so what you get is you get the magazine as you would 4 times a year. Each time there's a magazine, you're going to get an additional PDF file, full color, formatted stuff that's not in the magazine.
That's so cool.
So I've almost got the equivalent of 3/4 of another issue, but in full color, that it's going to go out to these VIP members.
That's so cool.
And the cover is just the VIP logo. So it's a VIP book.
Yeah.
And then each one is watermarked. So it says VIP, and then it will have the person's first name, and that watermark will appear on all the pages throughout the PDF. That's my way of keeping everyone honest.
For sure.
So they don't send it out to somebody for free.
It's out there.
And
No good.
Yeah, exactly. And it says very clearly in our agreement on the VIP membership, if you do that, it's over.
Done.
It's non-refundable. You're done.
Makes sense.
But yeah, so it's just to keep it special
Yeah.
for the people who pay the money. Now, the other part of it, so they get the PDF. They also get the Zoom, the 30-minute Zoom with me. And I'm just going to say, it's not a guarantee, but you never know who might join me.
That's so cool.
Okay?
It's very possible with you. It's very possible. That's not out of the question.
So then I've already got, for us to even carry this idea out, I had to know that I had enough swag to pull it off.
Yeah.
So I went through my stuff and I said, yeah, I got enough stuff here. And so it's kind of be like the mystery boxes that people I've seen, like I want to say Marvel or something, or Star Wars or whatever it is, people send off for a mystery box and they get a box of stuff, and it's everybody gets something different.
Yeah, right.
Some might get something they already have. I don't know, because I don't really. One of the things in saying welcome to the VIP membership, I send out an email. I welcome them and say, tell me a little bit about yourself. And there's a series of questions so I can get a sense of how long they've been a fan, how long they've been subscribing to ESQ,
Right.
and how extensive their collection is. So that I can get a sense of, well, okay, this, and who their favorite member is in song and album, typical stuff.
Yeah.
So I can get an idea of what they would find really great.
Right.
So I reached out to people, and one of the first things that I've gotten so far, and people being band members and such, send me some stuff that I can give away to these VIP people. So this is one thing that came in.
Oh, that's so cool. Look at that.
So this is the All Access Pass, signed by Paul von Mertens.
That's so cool.
That's not as cool as this other thing. So I'm going to read you this letter, because this letter, to go with what I'm going to show you, is so cool. It almost made me go, oh, I want to keep this. But I'm not going to. So I'm going to show you. That is the autograph, Paul von Martens Paul Van Merten's harmonica. And when I opened the package and saw not just that, oh, it's an autographed harmonica, but then when I read the story behind it and that this is the harmonica that we hear on that song and on that tour,
It's historical.
this is an historical little
Yeah.
piece of history. It's significant. I mean, I love it. So some lucky VIP member is going to end up with this. So that's something I haven't quite figured out yet, how we're going to, approach putting certain things in certain boxes and mailing them off, because everybody's going to get some.
Right.
It's almost like I want to kind of get the packaging ready, put everything in the different containers, not know what's in there, and then just put the labels of the people on it without knowing what's in it, and just sending the stuff off. So I'm not controlling who gets what. I just want everybody to get, because now not everything is as special as this, right? As historic as this.
Right.
So, a bunch of stuff are like backstage passes and things like that. It's the type of thing that Billy Hinchy was giving away on his show. Things like that.
Sure.
Drumsticks or guitar picks and things like that. So
that kind of stuff is, you only get it if you go to the show. If you can't go to the show, it's special to have it. So it's a great idea for the VIP.
And then I've got bizarro things this won't make any sense to anybody, but it's going to go in the VIP because I have all these strange things.
Whoa, cool. Awesome. Jeez. Awesome.
Petty and Dylan.
Ooh, that's cool.
Elton John.
That's cool.
There's another Monkees. There's several Monkees.
I like that one.
Here's one from Kiss.
Awesome.
So I'm telling you, this is here's Rush, 1984.
Whoa.
Or 1994? Yeah, 1994.
That's so cool.
So I've got all these. So it's not necessarily there'll be a Beach Boys pass, but again, this stuff is going to be kind of randomized and put in. And it's my hope that people who are getting these little gift boxes or whatever, have something new that they didn't have before. Because that's the goal. And that's kind of why I ask those questions.
Right.
So once I do a Zoom with the person, I may give them an idea of what I have, and they say, I've got this, this, and this, but I would love to have this.
Yeah.
And I might be compelled to actually be that specific with somebody, because everybody's going to say, I want the harmonica. No one's going to pass on the harmonica, but I've only got one, so that's the tricky part. So
that's funny.
And then another part of it is, when we started this, which has it's been less than a month. I think it's roughly 3 weeks.
Yeah.
We didn't even announce it. I just put it up on the website as a drop-down menu from magazine subscription, and out of the blue, we had 3 people.
Yeah, someone I was talking to the other day said they already signed up for it. I forget I think they're in England, or Spain or something. I forget.
Oh, probably Jamie Brewster.
That's him. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
Yeah, he was like, yeah, I signed up for it. I'm like, oh my God, that's awesome. So it's going to catch on.
So we, in the magazine, I don't know if you noticed, but I put 20, limited 20 members.
Yeah.
We've already gone over 20 in 3 weeks. And so I'm hoping it doesn't go more than 25, because it'll get a little, it might affect how much I can give to each person.
Yeah,
so,
maybe.
But we may just say, I may have to put up an announcement at some point and just say we're capped for 2023.
Right.
We have to kind of wait for 2024 and give me more time to get some swag from all the different people I've requested swag from, to be able to, because I don't want to take off all these great artifacts that I have on my walls.
No way. No, get like Mike's hats, get some of Bruce's shorts from the 80s, like that kind of stuff. People lines over that stuff.
Bruce's tube socks.
Get some of those tube socks. Oh my God.
I need some tube socks, Bruce. Do you have any tube socks?
one of Mike's knit hats from the 70s, and people would love that stuff.
That's an idea. That no, it's funny because I didn't actually email the guys themselves,
Oh yeah.
but I think it's a good idea to ask.
I mean, they gotta have a warehouse full of stuff at this
Oh,
point.
you
They
know they do. You
don't know
know they
what to
do.
do with it at this point. It's just
Exactly. Well,
if
I do know that I have a box of stuff from Dean Torrance coming.
oh, that's awesome. People will flip
I
over
had
that
no
too.
idea. I asked for his Grammy. I did. I specifically said, "Can you put your Grammy in there?"
That's
And
amazing.
all the other thing I asked for is I said I also would like your sister Kathy's needlepoint of Harry Nilsson's The Point album.
Oh, she did that?
Yeah, Kathy Torrance.
No way. I didn't know that.
Dean designed the album packaging.
Yeah, yeah. I knew that part.
Yeah, yeah, his sister Kathy did the needlepoint.
Hey, that's cool, man. I got that record.
It's on the wall in his daughter's bedroom in his house. I've seen it. I've also seen the Grammy on top of his toilet.
It's a great place to put it. Yeah.
That's what he thinks of the business. So what
Oh
better
yeah, sure. Right, right.
place?
That's funny, man. Um, if you talk to the guys, be like, you know what? If you get a box of Somewhere in Paradise on vinyl hanging around somewhere, just throw those in there. Just VIP those guys.
Man, I don't know who would have that. I've got one of those.
You really? They're hard to
Yeah,
find.
it's
They're
it's so
impossible.
it's so flimsy.
Yeah.
I don't know if the quality of the sleeve and everything is just so
Then
almost.
yeah.
It kind of gives you the idea. It's like it was a bootleg or something almost. But I think it's Belgium. Is that the
South Korea.
okay? Yeah, just the
That was it.
strangest.
That was it. One time
Strangest
run.
thing. Yeah, I someone was getting rid of their collection several years ago, and I got it for a very reasonable. I think $200.
That's extremely cheap. They go for like 4,000 bucks on eBay.
That's nuts. That's
It's stupid crazy. But no, I mean this VIP package thing is really cool. I've had people ask me questions about it, so they're gonna find their way towards you eventually to ask the better questions. But for everyone watching, esquarterly.com. I always get that wrong. esquarterly.com for the website. Go through the drop down menu. You can find the VIP package, and even if you're not VIP, just sign up for the magazine itself because the information you get from these things, this is where you want to go for Beach Boys stuff. This is what exists. And I met a bunch of people the other day. I went to see Al Jardine with his band a couple nights ago. Amazing show. It was so great. And Al mentioned a Beach Boys documentary is coming out next year. He just blurted that out on stage. And I was like, oh, thanks, Al. So that'd be cool. But I met a bunch of people after the show, and it was really cool to see the reactions to the music, but watching them come together as fans and just talk about the band was extremely heartwarming. So to have the community exist now where they could pick up an issue like this and deep dive into stuff and then talk about it in person, it's really special, especially all these new people getting into the band that are in their early 20s or their teens. Like, this is the kind of stuff they're going to go towards for years to come. So
I hope so.
it's an important thing. It's a publication of record, if you will. But David, man, thank you so much for being on. This has been so much fun to chat about this issue, and some of the surrounding stuff. We'll have to talk about Al and his little comment about the documentary soon. That'll be fun to chat about. But
It's gonna be great.
that's I'm sure it will. But yeah, thanks so much for watching, David. Where can people find you online?
Well, the VIP members we're going to be scheduling Zooms together. Every one of those Zooms will go up on our YouTube channel.
Oh, sweet. Okay, cool.
So everybody will get to see the interaction and the questions that the VIP members ask me and the
That's
things that we
awesome.
talk about.
That's a smart idea. Yeah.
And then one of the things that I didn't mention about the VIP thing, so is once we have probably around the holidays, I'm going to gather and schedule, and it's going to be a little tricky because like Jamie Brewster, who's in Spain,
Yeah.
it's a little tricky, but the idea is we're going to have a community Zoom with all the VIP members.
That's an awesome
And
idea.
it's going to be a brainstorming session where I'm inviting them in because the 30-minute Zoom with just me for each member is going to be a situation where we talk about the issue or talk about what they enjoyed, that type of thing, very kind of more specific. The
Sure,
community-based thing is going to be where they're all invited in to kind of give me ideas about what they'd like to see, what they haven't seen in ESQ. If they're new to the magazine,
Yeah.
would the others suggest to them to check out in the ESQ store, that type of thing. And so that'll be good. So esquarterly.com as you pointed out, if people are interested in just subscribing, there's a magazine subscription tab at the top. If they want the VIP membership, and it doesn't matter where you live in the world, you can get it. You click on the magazine subscription, and there's a drop-down menu that says VIP membership, and it'll take you right to that page. And there's two logos, one that says US, and then outside the US.
Yeah.
Slightly different logos, so you can see if, depending on where you live, you can click on one or the other, either or, and that'll just take you to the memberships. And we welcome the memberships, because I forgotten as we were talking that Dean was sending me a bunch of stuff, but I'm not going to if he does send me his Grammy and the needlepoint to the point, I'm not putting that in anybody's VIP membership.
I would hope you keep that one. Yeah, that's.
I will put, if I get the Grammy, I will put it on my toilet. I just to honor the guy. I have to honor the guy.
You can just flush it to you, and it'll just go. You're good. Yeah,
like a tube. And but yeah, so I just wanted to find a way. That's what I felt when I was on, like you were on the content creator platform with Beach Boys Talk.
Yeah,
so when I was on there yesterday, I thought, I really do have something to talk about. I created it's a way to interact with the readers, because I've been trying to figure out, how do we make something special for someone, and bring them in and make them a part of something. And again, I just really didn't know, but we've had an overwhelming response to it. And again, within 3 weeks, we have over 20 VIP members worldwide. So it's come one, come all, I guess. I may have to stop at 30 for the year 2023, because that's going to keep me pretty busy.
Yeah, it'd be kind of nonstop at that point. But
30 Zooms. I'll have to schedule them on Saturdays and just do one back to back to back to back to back.
Once a year, yeah. That's funny.
So, but no, it's encouraging to see that there's that level of interest in the magazine and in the experience, and giving people that type of experience. So that's where people can find the magazine, is at esquarterly.com. That's ESQUARTERLY.com. So and you can check the whole thing out. And there's a news and reviews button, which kind of tells you the latest editions that are coming out. And we have reviews that are popping up. We have a new writer on our staff, Ron Vaccaro.
Awesome.
And so he's written a couple of reviews. He wrote the July 4th Hollywood Bowl reviews, because he went to all 3 shows.
Sweet.
And then we just recently posted another review of his by Blaine Campbell, if you know who Blaine Campbell is.
Yeah.
In the California Sound. He's got a new album out. So if people just want to go check out the site, see what the magazine's about. There's Blaine Campbell. Hey, and look at that back page ad. Look at the very back. Look at that. There it is.
Buy that too. All right. Dave, man, thank you so much. It's always fun to hang out with you and chat for a while. We'll definitely do this again, because we got to talk about some projects you've done musically over the years. Got a whole bunch of these guys we'll chat about. But yeah, thanks for watching, everybody. Leave some comments below for David and me, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.
Take care, everyone.